Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another replay VOD, and as it happens it's going to be another Zerg versus Protoss. This time we are not looking at the European scene, but this time we are actually having a quick look at the Korean players. This is of course Heart of the Swarm, and we now have Genius for Team Azubu starting to the top right of Neoplanet S. And to the bottom left in blue, his opponent, Symbol. Using a barcode letter ID in this replay, but this is Symbol, rest assured, it is definitely the Zerg player from Team Azubu, a very strong Zerg that made it into the final of the last Code S season at the GSL. I really hope that this time the settings are a little bit better in the first VOD that I recorded this year with my new computer. Thanks to Asus once again for my awesome new PC. We had a few problems because I didn't set up everything properly, but now everything should work fine. If you have any problems with lag, with the screen, with the audio, just let me know and I'll adjust it. This is still a little bit of a process, so if you think that the sounds are too loud or not loud enough, just let me know in the comments on YouTube and I will definitely work on that within the next few games that I'm going to cast for you. So currently we are here in a ZVP on Neoplanet S. And Neoplanet S is a map that has been introduced in Pro League, which is the second Korean league that we have in Korea. It's a little bit of a newer map that is now also played in the GSL. And in general, Protoss players have a little bit of a tough time here. The reason for that is simply because the third base is so difficult to take. Whereas we have Genius at the top right, you can see that his natural is really easy to take here. You have a little bit of a choke point here at the front. We already see the pylon for Genius, so he's going into a forge play. What we see from Wings of Liberty, we've seen this quite a lot in the original StarCraft 2, now in the Iron and Heart of the Swarm. It's still a viable build. You can start with gateway builds a little bit more easily now that you have access to the mothership core, but still forge expands are really strong. The problem is not the natural. Two-base play is really easy on Neoplanet S. The big problem on this map is getting your third base. The third is all the way up here on this high plateau, has an access to the left, another access area with a huge choke, a huge ramp here to the right, and you can see that the distance between the natural and your third base is quite huge. So it's a little bit tough to defend that against constant aggression from a Zerg player, and we need to see what exactly Genius has up on his sleeve. He needs to do something against Symbol here, and we will definitely see some of the new units now of Heart of the Swarm. The Overlord for Symbol is already in position, so he knows exactly what Genius is doing here, can adjust his own build accordingly. In our last game we already talked a little bit about the Zerg build orders that you can have and that you still want to start things off with a spawning pool, which is exactly what Symbol did here. Symbol now here with the spawning pool first, headed into an expand at his natural, and then even before we hit the 4-minute mark, he goes right into a third base. And this is just a reaction to him seeing that we had this early nexus of his opponent. StarCraft is all about trading. It's all about how you interact with information that you've got. Every single decision that you make comes at a cost. So you can decide to go into a fast attack, but this will leave you weak in the early game, or comes at the cost of a very bad economy in comparison to what you could have got if you just stayed on Latch Tech, for example, for a little bit longer, get your third base up a little bit faster, which is exactly what Symbol does here. He doesn't take gas at this point, he's just focusing solely on his minerals, trying to get this third base into the game as fast as possible, droning up, getting a good economy, getting ahead of Azubu Genius, and then adding a lot of gas, adding the tech, and trying to overwhelm his opponent with a better economy that he will have. So let's see if that works out. For Genius, on the other hand, of course, now we have this two-base play. He already has a Zealot here on a hold position, as you can see, and the Zealot provides him at this point with a really good ramp, huge wall, no chance for Symbol to actually get in there. Couple of things that Symbol can actually do depending on what kind of tech choice Genius goes for, especially against Stargate play. Roach and Speedling can be very good in the early game, and this is actually exactly what we're going to see from Genius. We are seeing the Stargate now, so Symbol has to make a few choices here. He can either go into the tech and then into the late game, trying to expand again and get a fourth base as soon as Genius tries to take his third, or he can also just try to apply a lot of pressure and maybe take down Genius early on. So a couple of choices for him here. But for Genius, the attack into Stargate is a very viable one. Usually if you do that, you try to do early damage. You can start, of course, now with the Oracle early on, but you can go into a normal Phoenix play. You can start with even Void Rays. They're a little bit stronger right now in Heart of the Swarm. So many options that you've got. Another choice for him would, of course, have been to go into the Robotics, which is what you oftentimes do when you try to take a third base, go into Robotics, go into Twilight Council. But as you can see, Genius at this point doesn't want to go into his third base right away. But first of all, he wants to do a bit of damage. He has the Stargate in a position that is usually not scouted by Overlords. But Symbol sends an Overlord in, and he knows about the Stargate now. He sees it. What you usually do is, when you have the Overlord, you try to just scout the back area of the base. This is where a lot of Protoss players will hide their tech. Symbol doesn't really do that. He always has an inkling, his spider sensor just tingling here a little bit, and he's like, well, I actually want to see what is in this area. And he finds the Stargate, and immediately we have a little bit of a change in strategy for Genius. Originally, his waypoint was right next to the Stargate. He tried to hide his Phoenixes, but now with the knowledge that Symbol knows what's coming and will prepare accordingly, he heads out with the Phoenixes right away to at least kill some Overlords. Spore Crawler's already placed down for the Zerg player. We have extra Queens, of course, 3 in total by now, 1 at each hatch, and here comes the Queen defending with the help of the Spore Crawler. You can already see that there's not a lot of that Genius can do at this point. He's still producing Phoenixes, and he will try to take down as many Overlords as possible, and this serves several purposes. For once, you make sure that your opponent doesn't have a lot of scouting information on the map. You might actually even supply block him, and of course you also force him to rebuild the Overlords that you take down. And the Phoenixes are very strong to just swoop in, take down maybe a few drones. For example, try to aim for the gas drones here, mess a little bit with the gas income of the Zerg player, and you can use them later on as well. A Zerg player can go into, let's say, Infestors later on in the game, where you can use the Phoenixes to go for a bit of a lift. But right now, the first thing that we see Symbol do is actually head out and, whoa, catches all these units off guard, with Genius is just trying to take his third base. So already a little bit of a win for Symbol here, picking off a few units that were just transitioning over to that third base. And still, the Phoenixes for Genius still trying to find a few victims here. Maybe pick off a drone. That's exactly what I mentioned earlier. Trying to mess a little bit with the gas income here. And this is something that Symbol has to pay attention to. So another Overlord is being killed. And so far, things are looking not too bad for Genius. I mean, he didn't do too much damage with his original attack, but he forced a few Spore Crawlers. He was able to just take down a few Overlords, and now he's trying to take his third base. Already securing it with the Photon Cannons. The Phoenix is still trying to do some damage, while the Zerglings are just waiting for a few units to transition over between the natural and the third base. And of course we also have this burrowed Zergling here that gives a little bit more vision. Phoenix is at the bottom, still doing damage, still trying to go in and take down maybe 1 or 2 units. So a very annoying strategy. And you can really see that it already worked out a bit for Genius. He killed one of the drones that was in the extractor, and we now have only 2 or 3 possible drones mining gas. So this will limit the gas income of Symbol a little bit. A slight oversight by the Zerg player here. But the Zerg now with the transition into the Hydra. He knows that he has to do something against the air force of his opponent, and he also wants to put a bit of aggression onto the third base of his opponent. So right now, the choice to go into the Hydra deck, and Hydralisk got a new upgrade for Heart of the Swarm. You can't only research the range upgrade for the Hydralisk, but you also have the option to research speed, which makes them so much better off creep. Think about all these times when you actually watched the Wings of Liberty match where the Hydralisk just looked like grandmother with a wheelchair off creep because they were just so slow. Right now it's a little bit different. With a speed upgrade they are a lot more just viable, a lot more aggressive. You can even micro against a Colossus, for example. So a really strong unit. Lings are now everywhere for Symbol, and Genius has to be careful because this is exactly the timing that I talked about earlier. When you are a bit weak with your third base, you need to bounce between the natural and the third, and your units are a little bit exposed. But Symbol at this point realizes that his army is not strong enough yet. Yes, he has those Hydralisks to the left that try to flank, but at the same time he does not have enough units to really make this happen. So he decides to instead go into a 4th base, try to stay a little bit ahead of Genius in his overall income, and we have him with a tech into Hive now. Already building a lot of evolution chambers here at the front, so he definitely wants to go into a Viper play. The evolution chambers here will allow him to use Consume, so very, very important. And at the same time we have a lot of transitions also going on for Genius. We of course don't want to neglect the Protoss player, but first of all a little bit of an aggression here. The Zerglings, two overzealous running right into the Colossus and all these Protoss units, not really able to do anything, and now suddenly the entire army of Symbol is on the run, and Genius is using this very well, picking them off with the Phoenixes, using the Graviton Beam here, following it up with this entire army, doing a great job here. And as you can see, Symbol is losing quite a lot, and Genius starts to close this gap in overall supply that resulted in Symbol's better economy early. But I wanted to talk a little bit about the change in transition. We had the opening for Symbol, of course, with the Stargate that we talked about in the beginning of this game. The Phoenixes, by the way, still trying to do a little bit of damage here at the 4th, but let's focus a bit on the Protoss player for now. We have a robotics bay and also, of course, the robotics facility, so the Colossus transition is complete. Also, the Twilight Council has been produced, which gives him access to the +2/+2 attack upgrades. You see the +2 weapon upgrade as we speak. And, of course, he can go into Blink, which he just researched and charged. Really important here. And for Genius, this is now a tech where he adds, with the help of the additional 5th and 6th gas at his 3rd base, the Templar Archive. Going into a few Void Rays, a unit that we've already seen in the game between Dimaga and Tyrantius, very strong against Zerg these days, especially in composition with this unit force, gateway force that we see now on the map. So very strong play here by Genius so far. Didn't suffer a lot of losses, actually he picked up a lot of Symbol's units, is ahead now in the resources losses, you can see. But this army is getting a little bit stronger, and now with the Vipers, this is very dangerous, especially for those Colossi. The high-tech units of the Protoss player immediately abducted into the Hydralisks, and this is very well played so far by Symbol, using the Blinding Cloud here as well. Another abduct, get over here, using it Sub-Zero style. A little bit of Mortal Kombat action here in this game, but Genius still has a lot of units, and he is making this work, blinking forward, trying to be aggressive, taking down Hydralisks. A very back-and-forth game now, where Symbol is trying to keep the Vipers alive, using Consume already to have another abduct available. Also Blinding Cloud can be used here. Guardian Shield, of course, activated for Genius, and Genius is now moving in, taking down more and more units, but he underestimated the Hydra Force a little bit. There are too many of them. He needs those Colossi at the same distance. The problem really is that they are really difficult to save against those abducts. The Vipers coming into play in this game quite heavily. Now we have +3/+3 even researched for Symbol, and Symbol expanded to the bottom right with another cheeky 5th base. A little bit of a ninja expand here. Another immortally out of position. But Genius still has a strong army, and he now has also an addition to his composition. We have him with High Templars. And I mentioned it while we were watching the game between Tyrantius and Dimaga. It's really important to have those High Templars. With the Storm, you are very strong against Hydralisk, against low life, like low hit point units like Hydralisk. But at the same time, you can use the feedback against the Vipers, against potential Queen play. So a very strong unit in the late game for a Protoss player. And this is exactly what Genius now focuses on. Trying to go for this composition with Colossi, High Templar, and a Gateway army. +3 attack, that's what he's currently going for. Neglected the armor upgrades a little bit, but even the 4th base now established for Genius. So very good play so far. Let's have a little bit of a look at the upgrades. You can really see here the range and the speed upgrade for the Hydralisk +2/+2 is researched. We have Borrow. We have the first air upgrade even for Genius now, who wants to have the option of going into a little bit of a more air-centered army later on. In regards of the production facilities, we have 5 hatcheries and the hive, so a lot of lava available to Symbol here, whereas Genius is already on 10 warp gates and has the additional Stargate and of course his Robo. Here comes another one of those fights, really close. He doesn't really want to engage into this choke point, but uses the Blinding Cloud already. Really nice play so far. The feedback takes the energy of one of those Vipers. The second one also catches the feedback. No abduct in this game, but both Colossi walk to the front and are immediately being picked off by the Hydralisk. So a little bit of a sloppy positioning here by Genius, but a lot of firepower for the Protoss player. And he moves in right away with a forward blink, is confident that he can take down those Hydras, and he doesn't look too shabby, but the upgrade advantage definitely in favor of Symbol here. And this is a pretty decent trade for Symbol, who had a big bank, even now has a lot of resources left, uses them to max out immediately, and you can really see how this additional economy that Symbol at this point has is working in his favor. This space at the bottom right really working out quite well for him. He was always at least one base ahead of his opponent, at some points even even 2 expansions up, and this works so well for him. Resources lost is very similar, but the Zerg player lost a lot more. The difference is really the economy that we have for the 2 of them, and of course the upgrades that are working so well for Simple. He's trying to chase this army away, already on the move, and here comes the GG as Genius decides that he cannot win this game, even though he's on 4 bases. The next push would have taken out this 4th base, and with the production that we have now for Symbol, even the transition into Ultralisks, it's just a little bit too much for him to handle. So once again, a very strong play here by the Zerg player. Genius with a very good tech, especially in the early game, doing quite a lot here, securing himself this 3rd base without taking too many losses. But then in the end, the macro of Symbol is just a little bit better. His unit composition is quite decent, and especially important was that in the first fight here, even though the Blinding Cloud was not really that successful, we had no abducts because of the good feedbacks, but those Colossi were walking to the front anyways, and this was a huge problem for Genius. He lost the Colossi, and against an army that consists to a big portion out of Hydralisks, you need to have either Colossi or you want Storm. You need a little bit of area of effect damage. That's something that Genius didn't have, and therefore he couldn't really deal with them. The gateway units alone just were not enough. So guys, I really hope that you enjoyed the game. If you did, upvote it on YouTube. Make sure that you subscribe to the channel. You can also always add me on Twitter at Khaldor. Would definitely appreciate it. If you liked the video, leave a comment, and I'll make sure that if you actually enjoyed the games, that I'm gonna upload a few additional ones in the near future for you. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you soon.